Good morning, members, officers and any members of the public who are viewing on Livestream. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Martin Khan and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. And also, if anybody in the hall who's got a mobile phone, please make sure that's on silent. Committee members present in the chamber, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please turn on your microphone and say your name so that your presence may be noted. As I said earlier, my name is Dr. Councillor Martin Khan and I'm member for Histon and Impington, one of the members for Histon and Impington Ward. My Vice Chair is Councillor Peter Fane.
Good morning, members. Peter Fane, Shelford Ward.
Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam from one of the members from Milton and Waterbeach Ward.
Councillor Ariel Khan.
Councillor Ariel Khan, Harston and Cumberton Ward.
Councillor Bill Handley. Is he? Yeah? No, sorry. No, no, okay, sorry. Councillor Lisa Redrup.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Lisa Redrup and I represent Harston and Cumberton Ward.
Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Judith Rippeth and I'm one of the local members for Milton and Waterbeach Ward.
Councillor Peter Sanford.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Peter Sanford, one of the members for Caxton and Papworth Ward.
Councillor Eileen Wilson.
Good morning, Councillor Eileen Wilson, member for Cottenham and Rampton.
I can confirm that the meeting is quorate. Do we also have some members of the officers with us in the chamber? Oh, no, Councillor Helen Leeming.
Oh, hi, good morning. I'm Councillor Helen Leeming. I'm one of the 3 members for Camborne Ward and I'm here as a local member as opposed to a member of the Planning Committee.
Okay. Councillor Jeff Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Jeff Harvey, I'm the member for Balsham Ward.
I can confirm that the meeting is quorate. We also have some officers with us in the chamber for the duration of the meeting. Rebecca Smith.
Good morning, Chair. Rebecca Smith, I'm the delivery manager looking after the DM team for West Area and also the compliance team.
Philippa Kelly. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. Philippa Kelly, Greater Cambridge Head Planning Service, Strategic Sites Manager.
Vanessa Blaine.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vanessa Blaine. I'm Legal Advisor to the committee.
Lawrence Dame-Marie Homan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Lawrence Murray Homan. I'm Dem Services for the Planning Committee.
And we have our technical support from Democratic Services being provided by Aaron Clark.
Morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Aaron here to do the technicals today.
And we'll also be joined by case officers throughout the meeting. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make known the fact so that it can be recorded in the minutes. We shall take breaks from this meeting as and when they are needed and as appropriate. Members should have received the main agenda pack dated the 3rd of October and the plans pack online supplement dated the 5th of October. Now for the apologies. The item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Lawrence, are there any apologies for absence today, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had apologies for absence from Councillors Dr. Toomey Hawkins and Bill Handley, who Councillors Anna Bradnam and Lisa Redrup have kindly stepped in as sub. Councillor Dr. Richard Williams has also sent apologies, and Councillor Heather Williams will be joining us late today. Thank you, Chair.
Declarations of interest. Members, now we come to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have interest to declare in relation to any item of business on the agenda? Any interest subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting. Please, would you like to raise it at that point? Jeff Harvey. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In relation to item 6, TWI in Great Abington, whilst I'm not the member for Abington, I do live in Abington, very close to that site, and having thought very carefully about this, I think it would be difficult for me to be completely objective about this, so I will be abstaining on that vote.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have non-pecuniary interest in agenda item 5. When I was still deputy leader, I had a meeting with the leader of the council and also with the Hill Partnership Group. So I don't feel like I can take part in the debate or the vote. So I'll leave the chamber for that item.
Okay. Item 4 on our agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. We have the minutes of the meeting held on 12th of September. Do any members have any amendments to make to these minutes? Councillor Rippeth.
Yes, I was surprised to read on page 7 that I had not voted in the agenda item 5 for the last meeting on the Orchard Park item. I had intended to vote to refuse the application, but I'm assuming perhaps Democratic machine just didn't quite pick it up.
Yeah, so just to confirm, unfortunately, Councillor Ripper's vote was not recorded by the electronic system, but the minutes will reflect your intention to vote, despite it not going through. Thank you, Councillor Ripper.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Can I take these approval by affirmation?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, now we come to item 5 on the agenda, Camborne. Land south of the pond, application 23/00123, land south of the pond, Camborne Business Park, Camborne. R&Co is the presenting officer. Please would you introduce this application?
Thank you, Chair. So the application reference number is 23/00123/FUL for the erection of 256 dwellings, the change of use of the existing marketing suite to a cafe, landscaping, car parking, substations, bin and bike stores. We have an updated officer recommendation on this application, which is to defer planning application reference 23/00123/FUL to enable the planning authority to fully review the additional technical information which has been submitted in relation to noise, vibration, and electromagnetic radiation. This information has been submitted by third parties and the applicants after the publication of the agenda and the publishing of the committee report. Officers have to have regard to policies SC10 and SC14 of the local plan, and also paragraph 187 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Officers need to consider this information to get to conclusions upon the issues raised in respect of noise, vibration, and electromagnetic radiation prior to a decision being taken on this application by committee. Thank you, Chair.
I would therefore like to go straight to a vote on deferral of the application. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Bradford. Do I have a seconder? Can we take an electronic vote, please? Voting for, to defer, you're voting for. Have you all voted? Okay. Okay. The application is deferred. Thank you very much indeed. Now we come to item 6 on the agenda. TWI Granta Park, Great Abington. An outline application for the development of the TWI campus. It's an extensive proposal, and you can see the detail of the on the front page of the report. It's a major application with wide public interest called in by the Parish Council, with key issues: design, landscape impacts, impact on heritage assets, trees, transport and car parking. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions of completing the Section 106 agreement. Michael Hammond is the presenting officer. Would you please present the application? The site visit was held on the 4th of October, just for information.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. So the application is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access. It's for the development of the TWI campus. Obviously, there's quite a lengthy description in front of you, which has been on the agenda pack as well. I'll go through the scheme, which provides further detail and explains this, easier than me reading off all of that. So this is the application site. Let's make a pointer option on. So TWI campus is, if you can see my laser pointer in here. You've got Abington Hall immediately to the east of the boundary. And then you've got Little Abington and Great Abington to the northeast and east respectively. And then the A505 further to the west. It's on the existing science park of Granta Park. I've got more detail coming up. So I'll go through the site constraints around the site. So this is, again, a rough location plan of the site. So firstly, you've got the conservation area, which borders the site and includes parts of Little Abington and Great Abington to the east. And just for reference, this black shaded line is a development framework of Little Abington and Great Abington again. Then I have got a more detailed list of building constraint map coming up, but again, Abington Hall immediately to the east, list of building there. St Mary's Church to the northeast, and then you've got St Mary, the Virgin Church, the parish here, and then other listed buildings around as well. There are pockets of surface water flooding on the site itself, as well as outside of the site. Then you've got the fluvial flooding from the River Granta, the flood zones for that, as well as the lake that's on the site. Then there are tree preservation orders, grouping ones. Some are on the site, some off the site. But principally you can see a historic one that runs along here through the site and encompasses some of the oak trees, which I'll get to later. And then it carries on along the main route into here, across the lake. The River Granta is a county wildlife site. And then this just signifies the extent of the established employment area that is Granta Park. So the site sits within that. So I've included some annotations on this based on the committee site visit we had last week, just to help members. So starting from, I guess, within the site actually, you've got Abington Hall itself, this building here immediately next to the boundary. And then you've got the curtilage listed cottage, which is where my mouse cursor is hovering around, and parts of the wall, which are immediately to the south of that. They're part of the curtilage listing of Abington Hall. You've then got the parish church of St Mary to the northeast in Little Abington, which is grade 2 star. Sorry, Abington Hall is also grade 2 star. There's the old vicarage further to the northeast, it's grade 2. The parish church of St Mary the Virgin of Great Abington to the east, which is grade 2 star. There is a farmhouse here, which is grade 2 listed. And then immediately, right at the bottom of the Granta Park site itself is South Lodge, which is grade 2 listed. So this is a more detailed site plan. So just to be clear, it doesn't include the riverside buildings, which fall outside the red line boundary and aren't affected by this application. You'll see in later slides, this building, RMCC, and the restaurant have since been demolished and are no longer on the site. That was also presented at the member site visit. So the distance from Abington Hall to the existing B3 building is 95.5 metres approximately. So this is the extent of demolition, so it includes the atrium and BBH building in here, Trevor Gooch building here, RJ building, RS building here, and then these buildings are already permitted under a separate consent, so their demolition isn't part of this application. a substation in here would also be demolished and be replaced further to the north as part of the proposals. So the application is accompanied by a series of parameter plans to define the extent of development in terms of heights and zones and where access, for example, would be. So I'll run you through those. Starting at the northern end, there's the North Deck car park zone, which would be a multi-level car park that's partially sunken and would provide additional car parking over the existing car parked area here. There's the B6 building in here, which would be, again, research and development. And that's next to the Kirchliche Cottage here. There's the B5 building in here, again, research and development. It has a substation immediately next to it in here. This would be a new access route to allow drop-off as well as disabled car parking at the front of the site here. B4, also research and development. Building BBB is an existing building, but it will be refurbished as part of the proposals. Then there is the B3 extension, which goes immediately to the east of the existing B3 building, and that would principally be to what would be to accompany, to allow for the TWI engineering hall to be expanded. So the footprint of that is approximately 1,700 meters squared. So that's the footprint, not the total area, for example. And then it's just under 2,500 meters for B5. Approximately 2,800 for B4. 1,800 for B6. And then the North Deck car park zone will occupy an area of 3,750 square meters approximately. And as pointed out earlier, it's about 95.5 meters to the edge of Abington Hall from B3. And as a result of the proposal, it would be approximately 72.2 meters. There would be 20-meter gaps as well that's stipulated on the plans in between BBB and B4 and B5 to create these sort of fingers, if you would, of spacing between the buildings. Another plan is maximum building heights. So the North Deck car park zone would have a maximum building height of 37.5 meters above ordnance datum. B6 would be 49 meters. B4 would be 56.5. BBB, whilst being refurbished, would be 45.9 meters. For context, it's currently 44.6 meters to the curvature of the roof. But there is an existing chimney which does go to 47.5 meters. B5 would be 53.5 meters. The substation would be 38.5, and then the B3 extension would have a maximum height of 49 meters. I have got plans later that also include potential plant zones and a comparison against the wider Granter Park site. Again, access and connections are included, so this route in here would be for vehicle route for deliveries and servicing. There will be a turning area in here for larger vehicles. So the large vehicles will be turning in there, so there is opportunity for a crossing, a pedestrian crossing, to create permeability north to south in these spaces. This would be a drop-off area, including car parking. And then it would connect onto the existing spine route that runs through the site along here and goes up to the lake and round. There would be a, which is part of the list of building consent application that's coming in after this on the committee agenda, a 4-meter gap in the curtilage wall to allow for a vehicle to pass through and connect to the drop-off area. So this is a schedule of the development. So approximately 10,000 square meters worth of buildings would be demolished. That is the BBH building, Robert Jenks, Trevor Gooch, and then the Renaissance Hall. These buildings would be retained as B1, B2, the refurbished BBB, and then B3. as well as the street element which connects the B3 buildings together. The B3 extension would have 2,000 square metres of additional floor space. B4 is the largest of the buildings with 13,500. B5, 10,000, B6, 6,000. So in total, as a gross figure, it's 31,500 square metres of floor space. But when you include the demolitions, it's just over 21,000 square metres. Of existing and new development is 63,000 or 64,000 square metres. So car parking on the site, there are currently 1,114 spaces, including this riverside area here. And under the proposal, through the decked car parking that would be going here, as well as some disabled car parking spaces along this drop-off, there'll be a net increase of 107 additional spaces. Following the member site visit, I provided a bit more information about the tree removals, and there is an update at the end of my presentation. The arboricultural method statement that was on the file at the time of the site visit showed these two trees in here being removed when in fact they are being retained. So there are 4 trees along this area being retained, not 2, as I pointed out on the site visit. But going through them, G50, so it's a group of common limes, category B2, so 3 of the 5 would be removed, and then 2 remaining would be retained. There's then this group of 2 in here, of which the larch would be removed and the hawthorn retained. Then there's this group of 2 at the back, sort of further west here, that would also be removed. This individual tree, T48, an incense cedar, would be retained. And then this Atlas cedar would be removed, as well as these 2 Norway maple trees, but they are category C trees, not category B, just to be clear. The other area of tree removals is around the B4 building, which would be 8 English oak trees and 2 number field maple trees, category B2 and B3. They would be removed in their entirety. And they form part of that tree preservation order historic line that I was referring to earlier. As well as removing trees, obviously they are proposing replacement planting at just under 4:1 in terms of a ratio. These trees in here would be translocated because they're of a size that they can be done, so they'll be translocated within the wider area. So whilst they will be removed, they will be re-provided as well as some additional planting. As mentioned, these trees need to be removed. They're too large to be translocated due to their size, so there's not an opportunity to do that. Additional tree planting is proposed in the form of cherry trees, 19 of those, 16 apple trees, 5 malus trees, and some birch and alder trees in the gaps, for example, as well. And then around the extension Abington Hall, there would be 3 number additional trees planted here, as well as another tree here within the actual grassed area adjacent to B3. But there would also be quite substantial additional planting in the area to the other side of the spine road to the east, around the setting of Abington Hall as well. So showing what that could look like. This is an illustrative plan, to be clear, just to show how tree planting could be accommodated around the site as part of the wider landscaping. Again, this is one of the reserved matters, so it's illustrative at this point. Going back to building heights, as I mentioned before, the largest of the buildings is 56.5 metres, which is B4. There is, on the plans, that would be permitted effectively a flue zone, which stipulates the maximum heights that flues could be. Not to say that they will be that big, but that is the maximum heights that would be permitted if approved. So approximately 6 meters, just under 6 meters above on this one, slightly larger at just under 9 meters in this one. And then at BBB, it would be around 4 meters additional flue height. And then looking at the B3 extension, it would broadly mirror the existing row of pitched roofs along here. So it would have a 49-meter height with potential for a 52.5-meter if you include the flue. And then, again, I've already touched on B4, but B6 would be 49 meters with potential for just over 4.5 meters additional flue height. And the decked car park would be 37.5 meters in height. Obviously, these are parameter plans and the maximum heights, just to be clear. So the north decked car park would be 2.5-story, partly sunken, as I mentioned before, and then rises above that. It will provide 177 spaces in total. So these are some illustrative graphics to help orientate the new development. So this would be the B3 extension, would be this end pitch in here. And then you've got BBB, B4, B5, B6, and the north car park. B1, B2, and the street element are unaffected. And again, they're the building heights that I've just mentioned before, but there's a better slide coming up that compares it to the wider Grant Park, which I think is important, which is here. So I think I have some animations that will come on. Yep. So for context, the Illumina building at the south is 56.65 meters in height. The TWI proposal itself is between 45.9 and 56.5, the tallest building being B4. Biomed Phase 2, which was permitted recently to the southeast, is the maximum is between 51 to 55 meters, 55.5 meters. Site 6 is 49.25 meters. And then the last building is site 1, adjacent to the entrance of the site, which is 57.1 meters. Yes, yeah. Just to be clear, they are AOD, yeah, I was say. So the scheme would be phased. So the idea would be that the B3 extension would be part of the first phase. As I mentioned before, that is the TWI engineering hall, so this is quite a significant part of their development. Then would be the demolition of the buildings around the cottage and the new build of B6. The northern car park and parts B5 to B4 would then come in part of the third phase. And then the final phase would be the refurbishment of BBB. So these are some illustrative layouts. As I mentioned before, the matters of scale, design, landscape, etc. are all reserved. This is just to provide an indicative idea about how it may look. So this is the north deck car park is in the bottom left corner here for context. This is the B6 building with the cottage. You can just make out the roof, the orange roof in there, the cottage. This would be B5 over here. These are the existing riverside buildings that are unaffected. B4, the largest of the buildings here. And this would be the refurbished BBB. The additional wing of B3 would come in here. And then they've put on, for context, the Biomed permission, for example, over here, as well as the other buildings around. And again, just an illustrative view, looking at how B6 might look. We're looking almost across the lake east from the cricket ground. The riverside building existing in the background, and then the edges of sort of B5 and the main entrance there. Going further along, yeah, there's B4, B5 here, and then the existing street, and then that's the western end of B3. So members who are on the site visit will recall we went round the key views that have been identified. They're the ones in yellow that the landscape team, conservation and urban design have all agreed are the key views, so they will have been modelled in the landscape and visual impact assessment. So 1 next to the entrance, 26 from within the site, 16 at the Bourne Road junction, 13 at St Mary's Church in Little Abington, 12 from the public footpath as it just goes over the River Granta, and 2 which is from Pampsford Road to the south. And then there are some internal views southeast of the actual site itself, near Det Car Park, 22 which is from Abington Hall. That's it, yeah. So this is as existing from Granta Park. So in the bottom left corner, I've tried to use this to hopefully help orientate you. So looking to the east, with wireframes on to indicate, so you've got B6, for example, over here, B4 will be in there, B3 extension, etc., to signify each building. That's how it would look. And then without the wireframes, so just the actual buildings themselves, is principally the upper level of B4 here, which is most visible. And then going to the north along Bournebridge Road, this is as existing. So you can see to the east parts of the northwest of Granta Park. The proposal will be coming in here. Again, it's the top of B4 in here that is principally visible, as well as parts of B5. And without the wireframes, that is how it would look. This is from St Mary's Churchyard, immediately to the northeast of the site. That's existing. And again, you can see parts of B4 coming in here. And then this is how it looks without the wireframe. This is the view from the River Granta footpath to the east of the site. So in the foreground are the existing riverside buildings. This is as proposed with wireframes. Again, B4, B5. And then with the wireframes off. And then this is view 2 from Pampersford Road, with South Lodge in the foreground. The development is screened effectively from here. There isn't a field in one because there's no difference. So then going within the site itself, this is looking from the southeast, so you can see the existing B3 building here. With wireframes showing B3 and parts of the roof there of B4. But principally it's the B3 which is nearest to here.
Sorry, just for clarification, the wireframes go across the mound of soil right in the foreground, but actually the ground in the foreground would hide it.
Exactly, yes. So yes, as filled. So yeah, you wouldn't see it because that's raised, this ground level here. So I've got a few from this view. There's a wide lens view, so I've sort of split it into 2. So this is, so you've got Abington Hall immediately to the to the left, sorry, on this plan here. Again, B3 as existing here with the wireframe, and then underneath is as proposed filled in. and then sort of orientating yourself slightly to the right from that, so looking almost directly westwards, you can see B3 coming in here, and then B5 in here. And then this just to show with potential mitigation planting. So if I just go back for context, see that there, let's catch up, yep. So you see there aren't many trees, for example, in here. So this is just to show what it may look like with additional tree planting. Then similarly from this view with additional tree planting. And this will be difficult to probably read, but it's showing, as I mentioned before, there was a building, next to Abington Hall here, which has since been demolished, as you can see on the bottom 3 images, and just shows the different layers, if you would, with mitigation planting at the bottom, for example, versus with just the proposed development, and then with wireframes. Then heading to the northwest of the site, looking across the lake. These are the oak trees in here that were referred to. This is the existing BBB building with the cottage roughly in this location here. And the bottom image is with wireframes, so showing the extent of development. And then these are wireframes as well as being filled in with tree mitigation. So you can see, for example, this is how it would look filled in at the top here. And then this is how it would look with potential additional tree planting. So as referred to earlier, there was an update to the arboricultural method statement. I'm starting with the second bullet point first, but just because I've already brought that up. You'll see previously, the version I showed had all 5 of those trees being removed, when in fact 2 are being retained. So just to make that clear, so it's a removal of 23 trees in total, not 25, as I've stated in paragraphs 3.4 and 10.87 of my report. The first update, bullet point wise, is that members may be aware Cambridge South East Transport Phase 2 is referred to in my report as a potential transport mitigation measure. Since my report was drafted, the Greater Cambridge Partnership Joint Assembly met on the 7th of September, the minutes of which were only published last week, which confirms that work on CSET Phase 2 has now been paused. While it's been paused, our feeling is that as this development is going to be phased over approximately 8 to 10 plus years, it's not considered this affects the financial contributions requested in the relevant paragraphs. In addition, the report makes clear it could go towards CSET Phase 1 or the Greenway as well, so the financial contribution doesn't need to change. So, concluding, in terms of the planning balance, in terms of, I'll start with potential refusal reasons. Members will note that there are objections from conservation regarding less than substantial harm to heritage assets, those being the conservation area of Great and Little Abington, the setting of St Mary's Church to the northeast, and then the Abington Hall itself. Officers agree that there is less than substantial harm to these heritage assets, and that's set out in my report, the detailed reasoning behind that. Officers have also concluded that there is a low level of harm to the visual quality of the landscape, principally through the removal of those oak trees. But that level of harm is very low in our opinion. And similarly, again, harm to the character of the area through the loss of those oak trees, so those 2 into 1. And then, in terms of material considerations that weigh in favour of the scheme, The principal development is acceptable as it's on an established science park. Officers consider there will be significant economic benefits through the creation of circa 1,500 additional jobs and 21,000 square metres of net additional floor space. The sustainability performance of the buildings will be far greater than the buildings to be demolished and will have long-term benefits in that regard. There's extensive replacement tree planting, which we feel compensates the loss of some of these trees on the site. There would be financial contributions towards local sustainable transport infrastructure, as mentioned, and there's an opportunity for biodiversity net gain on the site. So for the reasons set out in the report, the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now we come to a question of clarification. Councillor Williams, Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I make my questions, I just need to declare the interest. Didn't want to interrupt your presentation that I sit on the Greater Cambridge Partnership Assembly, and obviously there's reference to that through the report. I just note as well, the Assembly didn't make the decision to pause. That was made on the 28th by the board, because the Assembly isn't a decision-making body, so I was part of the consultation and scrutiny of that, but not the decision. So just two things. There was, at the board meeting, it was said that after a certain time frame there might be alternatives or alternative plans to CSET. So if we could make sure this does go ahead, that alternatives are included. Like I say, it won't make any difference to the amount that's there, but make sure that it's future-proofed. As you say, it's a long-term thing. The other thing, if I could just get clarification on, is that you might want to stop sharing your screen now. I don't know. It's lovely that you are making notes on what I'm saying, but yes. So obviously through the report from the parishes, understandably, there's a lot of concern about heights of the building and the changing. And I appreciate we're dealing with outlines, we've got the design parameters, but scale is something that will be dealt with later on. Is there potential at a later stage to look at ground levels and about, we have had it on other sites where actually we ask for the building to be dropped to a certain, to sort of excavate and dig in. Almost, we've had some buildings actually look very much like Lord of the Rings, sort of almost Hobbit based, because they're sort of built into a mound, and obviously that's actually quite pretty. Is that something that if this were to go forward today, could be sort of a compromise be found with the parishes, or be at least be able to, although they'd get the building height, which I appreciate they need for the commercial space, but be able to lower the ground levels? Or is that something that this outline, would that fall into design parameters rather than scale? I feel we're sort of like on a bit of a clarification there would be very helpful.
Okay. Through you, Chair. If permission was granted, there'll be nothing to preclude options of being explored that were sunken into the ground, for example. These would be maximum building heights, effectively, so they couldn't go above that height. We would need to assess the impact on the character, etc., as part of any future reserved matters application. So, in short, there's nothing to preclude that option being explored, but that would be subject to reserved matters at a later date.
So just to clarify, so everyone's clear, including myself, today we're capping the building height, but not its above ground height.
To be clear, yeah, it's the maximum height above ordnance datum is what we're, through the parameter plan. Yeah, that would be if permission was granted, yeah.
To clarify what Councillor Williams is saying, do we have any indication of the actual height above ground level? Because that's perhaps more clearer to members.
No, I don't think we have a plan that shows the ground levels in that regard. To say it says it's above ordnance datum on the parameter plans, for example, that's listed on there. But there's not a separate plan, so I understand that it's focused on that, but yeah.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. As I already said, I wasn't going to be taking part in the debate. Do I have your permission to leave? I think we're quorum without me saying. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did have a question. Clearly, one of the issues is the effect on Grade 2 Star, Abington Hall. The conservation team, in their second comment, say that they make no further assessment of the proposal on the setting of St Mary's, and the conclusions on assessment of harm remain as previously set out. That's paragraph 637 on page 92. So that is set out at 630, with the overall level of harm is considered moderate, less than substantial. However, they do say in both their first and second comments, further information and/or amendments required. And I thought it would be helpful to know whether any such further information or amendments have been put in. And on the same subject, looking at Abington Hall, perhaps I've missed it. I was surprised there was no comments from English Heritage.
Through you, Chair. Starting with the second part, Historic England were consulted and their advice was we defer to the advice of your local specialist officers. So they have been consulted, but they didn't make any substantial comments. Which I think is paragraph 6.70 of the report. In terms of the conservation team's request for further information, part of this was about a heritage addendum, which I think is referred to in their second comments. They didn't feel it went far enough, was their view. And the other aspect is about whether potential more tree planting could be done between St Mary's Church and, sort of, for example, around the riverside buildings. That wasn't feasible, and to be honest, it wouldn't have made a significant amount of difference, is the view that we took as officers. So we felt we had to assess it as what's being proposed.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I took the opportunity to go back again after our site visit, and I went on my own and had a look at the surrounding area. And what became apparent to me was that there didn't seem to be very much recognition of St Mary the Virgin Church in Great Abington. You've identified it on your heritage, on your identification of heritage assets, but there seems to be a degree of confusion between the two, because St Mary the Virgin in Great Abington is actually closer than St Mary in Little Abington. It's a slightly further distance. However, the views to St Mary the Virgin Church, which is due east, are somewhat obscured by trees, and so because it's lower. And I just wondered, in the report, and indeed the view from St Mary the Virgin Church, you can actually see the side of the riverside buildings. You can't actually see Abington Hall from there. But I just wondered whether you felt that sufficient weight had been given to the views from that church as well. It's sort of in the area of the farm that you referred to as well.
Through you, Chair. This application, I think, very clear in my report perhaps, has been through quite an extensive pre-application process as well as the design review panel. As part of the pre-application process, we had to agree the views from that landscape and visual impact assessment. The conservation team, again, did not request that view. I know they may not have explicitly said exactly why in their comments, for example, but it was never requested by the conservation team in terms of that impact. So my understanding would be is that they're comfortable with the relationship between that listed building and the site, that there isn't going to be harm. Otherwise, I'd like to think that they would have requested it.
Thank you.
Okay, have we any more questions? Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering about the principle of development policies. If
we look at 10.1, it says that, on maybe 10.2, sorry, about policy E15, the local plan and established employment area. I had a look at that, and point 3 of that policy was, sorry, just give me a sec, permission will be refused where there would be a negative impact on surrounding countryside or landscape character. I just wondered how that ties in, because the report does mention landscape character harm. So I'd be grateful for guidance on that. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. If, for example, officers were minded to refuse it in terms of that harm being sufficient enough to warrant refusal, then we would quote that policy and that criteria specifically. In this case, and as part of the application, we have to weigh up the material considerations of the application versus that harm, which obviously set out in conclusion, chapter 10, sorry, of my committee report. Our feeling is that we have identified there is some harm to the landscape impact, but that particularly the significant economic benefits as well as the other public benefits that would arise outweigh that harm. So I understand that it says if there's harm, it's unacceptable, but as officers we have to make that assessment in the conclusion. So if members or officers were minded to recommend, or members are minded to make a recommendation of refusal, hypothetically, then that policy could be used as part of that argument. But in this case, we're comfortable that the material considerations outweigh that harm.
Councillor Bradnam, and then I think we'll move to the...
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back a second time. I knew I meant to ask something else, and that was at 6.94, the paragraph on page 99. The report says there is no account of the acoustic surveys that have been carried out, and anecdotally I understand there's been quite a lot of problems with noise from the site for residents in Little Abington, and I just wondered why there isn't any account of the acoustic survey, because if there's been correspondence for a long time between the residents and the site at TWI, then why isn't there any weight being given to that? And I was having a quick look at the health impact assessment, and I see that there is a report there, but I haven't had a chance to see whether there is detail about noise. I wondered if you could clarify that, please.
Again, through you, Chair. There is a noise assessment that's submitted with the application. This looks at the existing background level, but as because we don't know what type of plant, for example, would be on there, it's not going to have details about this plant will cause this much decibel, etc. So there has been a noise assessment, and the environmental health team have been consulted. They are happy that it, in principle, is okay, subject to a noise assessment condition, which would then mean that once the reserve matters come through and there's more detail about the plant, this would help. But as I understand it, there may be a question for the agent when they speak. There have been ongoing dialogues with the parish council and local residents about noise. And I think environmental health from a statutory nuisance perspective have also been involved. I don't know the outcomes of those discussions, but it might be something that the agent may be able to clarify as they've been more directly involved in that side of it.
Sorry, I'm coming back on that. I can see there's a condition 8, conditions noise at 8F for demolition, but is there also a condition relating to noise on the site when buildings are in use, or will that not come until later? That's on page 142 and 143. F is at the top of the page 143, but that relates to construction. It doesn't relate to when the site's in use.
Through you, Chair, sorry to interrupt. Condition 18 would be the one that would cover that matter.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we move on to the applicant. Can I ask Mr. Justin Bainton to present the application? You have 3 minutes, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at Planning Committee. TWI is one of the UK's leading independent research and technology organisations and have owned the site since 1946. The campus features a number of buildings which are outdated, inefficient and no longer fit for purpose. This outline application will enable TWI to repurpose and redevelop the estate to meet their changing requirements, to provide new lab science accommodation, to which there's significant need, together with providing a platform to meet their ambitious sustainability agenda with a wider aim of being carbon neutral by 2035. Fundamentally, TWI cannot afford to carry inefficient dead space, which will fundamentally compromise the efficiencies of their operation and ultimately the sustainability of their business. The outline application has been subject to extensive pre-application discussions with local authority and key stakeholders and has led to the evolution of the scheme. This has resulted in a number of points which I want to make. This outline application is supported by a series of parameter plans, as indicated, and a master plan which sets out the framework for future development for the next 10 years and beyond, which is supported by officers. The tallest building within development, B4, is no taller than the Illumina building, but is also below that of the most recent consent, being Site 1. The building is located within the centre of the site and is bookended by the existing Brethren Braithwaite building to the west and building B5 to the east, which steps down in height to 3 to 4 stories. It's important to note there's a split change in level within the site, so buildings B3, B4 and B5 will read as being a story lower when viewed from the south, and overall the height of the scheme is very much in sync with existing development within the site, as explained in the committee report. The approach of making sensible but not excessive use of building heights has allowed the applicant to reduce the footprint of development and enhance the opportunities for landscaping, an approach supported by the design review panel. The existing curtain listed wall and cottage are fundamentally compromised by the older buildings on the site, and their removal creates opportunities for landscaping and open up connections with Abingdon Hall and create a focal open space to the development around the lake. Grant Park is surrounded by an established woodland belt, and this plays an important role in integrating the park with its surroundings. In terms of longer distance views, the greatest landscape effects are contained within the site, whilst the upper elements of the proposed development will be perceptible from a limited vantage points outside the confines of the site. There will be considerable distance from the site to these viewpoints, and the visibility will naturally diminish over time with the growth of planting of trees within the site, and the development of the reserve matter scheme would also respond to the site context as well. The scheme will deliver a net increase in 63 trees. The proposal will result in a removal of 23 trees. However, the scheme seeks to plant 86 in total, a ratio of just under 4 trees for every 1 tree removed. This is a significant level of tree planting. The scheme will facilitate replanning of the campus, provides TWI with the opportunity to review the access arrangements and security, and in doing so, the applicant has promoted a public access condition, which will provide a mechanism to review site access strategies. This is referenced in condition 20 of the committee report.
Please, can you wind up now, because it's a few minutes is up.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that the scheme is also will contribute to the Cambridge region in terms of the national, regional, local planning and economic objectives, generating additional employment. This is reflected in the Cambridge Employment and Housing Evidence Update 2022, which identifies as a significant shortfall of lab space accommodation. We think this proposal conforms with the Development Plan and National Planning Policy Framework.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Okay, have you any questions for the applicant? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, what size of trees would you be replanting, and how long do you think it will take for them to achieve the size of the trees that are being removed?
Within the landscaping strategy, we're proposing a good proportion of trees to be good stock sizes, so they're not small whippets. I can't give you the precise number now, but there is a good proportion which are good sized trees. We feel that they're going to start, normally within looking at an LVIA process, the assumption is within 10 to 15 years, those trees will start to make a meaningful impact on the wider landscape setting.
Sorry? Michael can comment if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to add to that in terms of this precise figure. It's they'll be generally in the 20 to 25 centimetre girth range. So then it says new larger specimen trees, and tree species have been included that provide a diverse and resilient palette that can thrive in challenging urban environments currently being impacted by climate change. That's from their arboricultural method statement.
I presume, therefore, that they will be tree spade, be installed by tree spade.
Yes, it does. Yeah, yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And through yourself, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, it was said about extensive key stakeholder engagement. We could have an idea of, with the parish councils in particular, how much engagement there's been and over what period. The other thing is in relation to the heights. Obviously, that's something of concern. So some sort of reasoning, or you've probably heard what I was saying about digging deep. Is that something that's been considered at any point? And finally, there is throughout the report from the parishes sort of concern that the access for the public isn't formalised, wondering whether it would be agreeable to have that as a condition, that there be some sort of public access arrangements, solid, so that the public know where they stand. Unless if I missed something in the conditions. It's condition 20. Right, okay. In that case, you might not need to answer that one, sorry. There's a lot of conditions to work your way through.
Mr. Hammond, can you, can you talk about the condition list?
Yeah, just on that last point, condition 20 has a public access plan as part of that. So just to come back on that point, but then the other questions were for the agent, I believe.
Mr. Bainton.
Thank you. I mean, in terms of pre-application engagement, we're probably working on the scheme for best part of 10 months prior to submitting the application, which involved consultation. We had a PPA, Plan Performance Agreement, in place with the local authority, which was obviously involved a series of meetings discussing the scheme, also with county highways and the like. We did have a public meeting with Great and Little Abington Parish Council, where we presented the scheme and discussed the proposals. And I think it's fair to say, from their perspective, and they'll be speaking, I think, shortly after me, so they'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the key kind of messages were about public access, which obviously we just commented on, and I think we feel that the Reserve Matters scheme, which will be coming forward, provides an opportunity to actually look at all the security measures within the site and how the site functions and circulates, and it's a prime opportunity for us to actually actively engage in looking at public access. It's not going to, the site isn't a public park, but I think there's obviously an understanding on the applicant's part that there's a degree of concern and frustration with the lack of access currently, which is borne out through historic reasons. But that's something which we see this application at the Reserve Matters stage being an opportunity to address. In terms of the public consultation, as I said, we did speak and discuss the scheme. The other point that I think was concerned was about building heights, which obviously has been in discussion so far today. I'm sure there'll be a debate about that later.
Councillor Williams, have you a further question?
Thank you, Chair. To clarify, the extensive key stakeholder engagement with the parish is one meeting. Is that what's happened?
Sorry, when I said extensive engagement, I wasn't in my speech. I was referring to generally the 10 months of work which led up to the planning submission. Just to be clear, we did have one meeting with the Great and Little Abington Parish Council. I know TWI have been speaking to them as well separately, but there was one formal presentation and discussion.
Okay, Councillor.
Sorry, apologies, there were two meetings. Apologies to be corrected.
Councillor Brandon.
Thank you very much. Yes, actually public access was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Mr. Bainton, because in the very distant past, I visited this site in a professional capacity, and when the site was first being developed with the new buildings that you are now about to knock down. And one of the things that was recognised there, that was when the footpath from Great Abington was established up to Abington Hall. And as far as I'm aware, there was always a footpath around Abington Hall and down to the riverside, to the River Granta below, and then up towards the Little Abington Church. But I noticed on a visit that that gate is now locked with a combination lock. And so obviously people who live in Great Abington or Little Abington and want to walk that way to work can presumably get through, but the public can't. And I just wondered, I understand the reasons why that's been done. I believe you had some damage on the site, and so you felt the need to improve the security. But I just wondered, do you believe that there will be a solution where some of that site can be accessible along that original footpath, and that can be, some of the site can be made accessible and some will not be? The other thing I wanted to ask was, to the west of Abington Hall currently, well, no, the other way around. On the plans, there is an indication of a settlement, what do you call it, a water, suds, what do we call it? Attenuation pond, to the west of Abington Hall and to the east of the existing road. And hence the screening planting on the plans is only indicated around the western edge of that attenuation pond. And I just wanted to ask, is that the same attenuation pond that currently exists? There is a slight dip in the ground there between Abington Hall and the road. So is that going to remain unchanged? And was the intention that trees will be planted along the west edge of that, as well as on the other side of the road, to screen the new extension of B3?
We're proposing sort of like an attenuation area which is adjacent to Abington Hall, and we've specifically planted or proposed planting around the perimeter of that zone. The site is chalk based, so there's good lateral infiltration that takes place, so that a lot of the time that area will remain dry. But the proposal that was shown on the sort of strategic landscaping plans is to kind of wrap the planting around that area. I'm not entirely sure which other zone you were referring to. Is that, sorry?
That's the area I was talking about, and I'm always slightly worried about containerisation of surface water, because the flush out from those containers can be in question. But that's fine. It is the area that I was talking about. But the second thing was the public access again, the footpath.
Yeah, I'm going to not be able to sort of answer that directly, in that I think the whole access strategy and the point of the condition is to actually look at all the entrance points into the park and how best to get the balance between providing ongoing security for the site, but also enabling access. And there is already access which is inconvenient to the residents, which is on the other side of the park. And I think obviously, I think the point is that currently there's got some old buildings within the site with very sensitive equipment, and I think the whole Reserve Matters schemes, as they come forward, will look holistically at the connections within the site and how security can best be provided. So I'm sure all the entrance points will be up for discussion, whether or not it's through some kind of electric code system or register. I don't know, to be honest, but that's something which TWI are committing to as part of the submission of the first Reserve Matters scheme.
Thank you.
I'm not quite clear from the response whether you're saying that the existing ground form is the final form for the attenuation pond, or whether further excavation will be undertaken.
There's a smaller excavation area adjacent to Abington Hall, There will be some excavation of part of the development of the scheme itself, although the scheme, as indicated within the outline application, does make use of the natural topography of the site, because there is a step change in level between the existing buildings and the buildings to the rear.
But specifically the attenuation pond, that is the final, the form that it is now is the final form. It's not going to be further excavated, or
We've shown we would expect full technical details to be presented at reserve matter stage. We provided an outline stage of strategy which has been agreed to by the lead local flood authority so it identifies those areas, but that will be developed again.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much indeed. Now we have a presentation by the Parish Council. Mr. Tony Orgy, Councillor Tony Orgy, Chair of Abington Parish Council, is here with us. You have 3 minutes. Can I first confirm that you have approval of the council to speak on the Parish Council to speak on their behalf?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Great Abington Parish Council fully understands and appreciates the need to replace some of the older buildings on TWI to improve their quality and environmental impact. However, it is important to remember that this is a rural area and not an urban location, and what is proposed needs to take account of its location. Great Abington Parish Council's reasons for objections are set out in paragraphs 6.53 to 6.65 in the agenda papers. As you've already said, the heights referred to throughout this document are above ordnance data heights, as opposed to the physical heights of buildings. Reference has been made to other buildings on the whole site of Granta Park. The Illumina building, for example, is 19.5 metres high, physical height. That's what you'd see if you stood in front of that building. The Gateway building on Site 1, the entrance to Granta Park, is 22.5 metres high, or will be when it's completed its construction. Proposed building B4 is 26.5 metres high, from ground level to the top of the building, apart from flues and so on. So this would be the tallest building on the whole of Granta Park. It would be the only building with 5 stories on the whole of Granta Park. The Parish Council's view is that a more appropriate height limit would be set at 49.0 metres above ordnance data. That is in line with the adjoining buildings B1, B2 and B3. And this, in fact, is in accord with the documents which were shared with Great Abington and Little Abington Parish Councils at a meeting held on the 19th of October 2022, which showed building B4 with 4 stories and not 5. I note from the agenda papers, something we hadn't seen before, was about the meeting of the design review panel, which met on the 13th of October 2022. Just a few days before the meeting with the parish councils. And I'd like to ask whether the design review panel saw buildings with B4 with 4 stories or with 5. The conservation team has commented that there would be a change in the outlook and setting of the conservation area due to the considerable additional height and cumulative impacts of the development. And in their view, view 12, in the LVIA demonstrates that the buildings B4, B5 and B6 would be visible over the existing built form and tree line due to the additional height and bulk. The Parish Council also concerned about the loss of mature trees and in particular the group of oak trees which have been referred to already. We would also commend the views of our two local district councillors, John Batchelor and Henry Batchelor, in the representation that they've made. And so in conclusion, what I would say is that Great Abington Parish Council recognises the need to replace some of TWI's older buildings, but considers in particular the perimeter height maximum should be no higher than 49.0 AOD.
Thank you very much indeed. Have we any questions for Mr. Orgy? Councillor Orgy. Councillor William.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. The October 22 meeting referred to, is that one of the two meetings that the previous speaker referred to? Or did you get in those two meetings to see it as revised with the new heights and the 5 stories?
Right, the October 19th meeting was organised by TWI and invited representatives from both Great and Little Abington Parish Councils, and 3 members from each council attended that meeting. There was a separate public meeting on the 30th of January 2023 in the Abington Institute, where the proposals, as the applicant had put forward, was presented to the parishes, and there was a full attendance, I think, at the meeting, and a wide variety of views were expressed. Almost entirely against the proposals. Although people could recognise the need for improving the buildings, improving their energy efficiency and so on, and therefore could see the need for what was being proposed, but not necessarily the detail.
Councillor Fane, you had a point you want to ask.
I just wondered whether the point that Councillor Orgy just raised about the height of B4 and what height was being considered by the design review panel last October. Our case officer was, of course, present at that, and I wonder whether that was worth clarifying.
Yeah, Chair, I can probably actually, it might be easier for me to actually share my screen. I have the design review panel presentation. If you just hold on one moment.
Sorry, with your permission, Chair. It tells us on page 153 about 4+1 stories. So,
it's a question the case officer apparently. So would you?
Through you, Chair. So hopefully it's sharing on my screen now that you can see it, hopefully. This is what was presented to design review panel. So you'll notice one of the main changes is actually around what was at B6. The design review panel had concerns about the overbearing impact that sort of extra wing here would have. But yes, at B4 it looks like it was what we'd call 4+1, i.e. 4 stories and then the roof plant above it. And I think that's set out on page 153 of the committee report in the appendix. So this is what was presented to design review panel. If that helps.
how does that relate?
Have we any other questions?
Sorry. Thank you. We need to know how the 4.1 relates to the AOD. That's the point that's...
Sorry, through you, Chair. In terms of the AOD point, I think this plan here should hopefully summarise it. At the design review panel stage, it was 52.5 metres AOD, not showing plant above, but that was what was presented at the design review panel.
And that is we're now told that the B4 is 56.5 AOD.
Yeah, B4 as proposed is taller than what was shown in design review panel. Again, the maximum height. It's largely as a result of losing that floor space on B6 that I was pointing out earlier, where it wrapped around. So it was reconfiguring that. Ultimately, sorry, I've gone a bit off topic here, but it was Urban Design have also obviously seen this and are comfortable with that extra height in terms of how it sits within the wider Grant Park, but that might be part of the debate rather than now.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I think my question is just going to be to try and clarify what the exchange just there was. So to be clear, the design enabling panel was consulted on a lower height than what is proposed.
Yes, the design review panel saw a different scheme as I presented, where it had 3 buildings, but the layout was different and the heights were different, yes.
I think it is generally the case that when you present a design review panel, the design is reviewed in relation to the conclusions, isn't it? Thank you. Now, I think that's all the questions. We now have. I will now listen to. We will now listen to the representative of Little Abington Parish Council, Jess Ashridge, and I propose after the presentation by Councillor Ashridge to the clerk, Miss Ashridge, to have a break, and then we'll come through to the debate after a short comfort break. Thank you. Mrs. Ashridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
You have 3 minutes, sorry.
Okay. Little Abington Parish Council objects to the application on the following grounds. The proposed buildings will create a very urban environment and will be visible across rural surroundings. The height of the buildings would also set a precedent across Grant Park site. Permissions have been granted for a 5-storey building at the entrance to Grant Park, but this has no impact on the surrounding villages, unlike the proposed application. The height is increased by 11.9 metres to be 5 storeys plus additional plant on the roof. This is wholly inappropriate in a rural setting and proximity to a historic village. The proposed development would dominate the skyline of a rural village. The additional materials provided by the applicant assert that the development would have a positive impact on the area and surrounding villages without providing any justification for this. The visual impact assessments submitted continue not to take into account the visual perspectives of the proposed development from the viewpoint of the villages of Little Abington and Great Abington, therefore presenting only an incomplete assessment. This is based on the meeting we had in January. The sightlines are all from within Granta Park. The addendum to the design and access statement is similarly, misleading. It presupposes that the only relevant height metric to be considered is against above ordnance datum AOD. This is an inappropriate measurement and has clearly been selected as it is biased in favour of the development. AOD is irrelevant. Only the actual height of the buildings, as used against physical ground level, is relevant. And by this reference, each of B4 and B5 would be materially taller than any of the other buildings referenced in the document. The document also fails to take into account the siting of the reference buildings on Granta Park, and the fact that the proposed buildings of B4 and B5 will be much more proximate to the Abingtons and therefore much more impactful. The rural setting of Granta Park and the inappropriate nature of the buildings of that height, the established understanding as evidenced in the historic decision notices and design guidance submitted that buildings on the site should be constrained in height. It remains the case even if similar total square footage of the proposed buildings were to be desirable, it could likely instead be achieved with buildings of comparable heights to those being replaced and building in the gaps between buildings BBB, B4 and B5. There is no account of the acoustic surveys that have been carried out. Noise levels from residents in Little Abington, particularly those living on Westfield, have been unbearable. There has been correspondence between TWI and residents for over 5 years regarding noise, with no signs of this concluding. There would also be a considerable increase in light pollution. The master plan for the Granta Park site included agreed walkways and permissive routes for residents. The master plan has been lost and access has been removed since 2018. This had been an asset for those living in Little Abington, as there are very few green spaces to walk in due to having the A11 and A1307 bordering the village. The council also recommend that the planning committee take all planning applications into account across the Granta Park site, including TWI, Biomed and other agents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Have we any questions for Ms. Ashridge? No, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Now it's 11:25. I will have a 10-minute break as we reconvene here at 25 to 12. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're now allowed again.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. Now we come to the debate. Have we any comments in the debate? Who would like to open the debate? Councillor.
Someone's got to go first. I don't mind it being me, Chair. I think, for me, this is it's a difficult one because I agree that obviously we want the employment space, we want more jobs, we want more environmentally friendly buildings and all positive. My microphone's playing up now. Conspiracy in the ranks. But yes, so for me, I think that what here is, it's needed and that it could be a very positive thing. For myself, and I'm particularly looking at our supplement pack, page 27, I do think in relation to the buildings, the natural area and the setting, that these are whopping great big, tall industrial units. I appreciate, and it's actually harder. I think it'd be easier if it was full planning rather than outline, because we've got the flexibility, but equally we're only looking at indicative and illustrative things. So I hope no matter what happens, people are listening to the concerns here. I don't think that the parish councils are being unreasonable in the 49 metre. I think that sounds actually quite reasonable. The fact that the local community are willing to support the development here is a really positive thing. I think it's a very mature thing and very, something that shouldn't be overlooked by any of us, because we know how difficult it is when things do break down and we don't have that. So I don't think that'd be unreasonable. But also I can see that the economic argument of wanting that extra floor, why we don't have so much land and going up. So for myself, I don't feel that the current proposal makes enough effort to create that balance which we're seeking between the benefits of this and its impact into the local area and local setting. So for me, I feel like there's still work to be done here into making sure that actually we get the best out of this. I've mentioned, obviously, for myself about lowering almost four levels above ground, basement, sort of below ground, something so you still get that space. I think there is potential here to get something that works, but I think if we were to approve something with such height at this stage, I would feel extremely uncomfortable about the impact. Some of the visuals that were shown us, we cannot get away from the fact that this is going to have a change on the landscape. But for me, it's just a little bit, I think there's more of a compromise to be had. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, before you go, I would just like to remind you again that this is an outline application, so we consider it in that terms, and there will be further detail in the reserved matter.
That's fine, thank you. Right, so I've said to members, I visited the site twice and I walked all around it in the villages of Little Abington and Great Abington, and I went with my binoculars and I went with my eyes and my camera. And whilst there are lots of things I don't like about this, they are large buildings on high land, but if anybody didn't attend the site visit we had, they will be unaware that actually the land drops quite significantly between the southern part of the site, roughly parallel with Abington Hall, and the north part of the site, which is immediately north of the B3 building. And that is why the applicant is quoting AOD, because although these buildings are high, they actually do already sit down below the level of the land at B3. So the buildings will be prominent. The B3 extension brings it that much closer to Abington Hall, the heritage asset there. And but having said that, actually I think getting rid of some of the rather older buildings around the heritage asset of the Gardener's Cottage and the curtilage wall, I think will actually improve the situation there. They're very unattractive buildings around it at the moment, and I think this could actually serve to improve that environment around that heritage asset. Clearly, in terms of business and wanting to enable, not preventing people from expanding businesses is important. We need to encourage employment sites. And so in principle, I think what is being proposed here is not unreasonable. And the reason I made the point about saying I visited the site from around it is that, yes, the buildings are tall, but actually there is a lot of mature mature trees in the landscape between the villages of Abington, Little Abington and Great Abington and St Mary the Virgin Church. You can only see views of the Riverside building. You can't actually see even the B3, which is a tall building on the site. And I think the B4 and 5 buildings, the tallest buildings, will actually be behind. So I think the views, with some planting, could be mitigated. I also think I would not like to think that we refused an application for something which will improve employment on the site and will rationalise the functions. But there are a lot of trees being felled here. In order to put the B3 extension on, there are some significant trees, and I'm glad it's not 25, it's only 23 that are being taken out there. The ones that my heart breaks over are the 8 oak trees, which are in the place where B4 needs to be built. And so I think I am minded to consider this. I'm still not quite there, but I would like to think we would be considering a really serious condition on this that says you need to replant, and not mature trees, because they don't have a great record of surviving, but actually set aside a piece of land on this park to plant 8 oaks and 2 field maples in a place where they won't be disturbed in future and can grow for 40 years and re-establish the biodiversity that that kind of tree has in it. Just as a little aide-memoire, an old tree of 40 or 50 years, an old oak tree of 40 or 50 years age can house as many as 1,500 different species on it. That would be lost, as will the microflora in the soil when these trees are felled. And so what I would like to suggest is that the applicant might want to consider this, setting aside a place on the site where they can build trees that won't interfere with their future plans for Granta Park, that will, in due course, in another 50 years, might restore the biodiversity that will be lost by these trees that were part of the park that was Abington Hall. So I don't know if we can do that, but that's what I'd like to suggest.
Councillor Fane.
Thank you. Like Councillor Bradnam, I visited the site, though I haven't perhaps paid such assiduous visits to the 2 churches. I see a number of issues before us. The first is the effect on the Grade 2 listed Abington Hall. Obviously, B3 will be substantially closer and with fewer trees, but that has been dealt with by our officers, and that is, I think, accepted by Heritage England, Historic England, there we are. So I think we should accept that. The next issue is the trees, which Councillor Bradnam mentioned. Yes, I'm sorry to see those go, and I see that on page 159, looking at the panel's view, they said that the oaks located on the site of proposal B4 is an important issue, which doesn't appear to have been carefully considered. Well, there's been time to consider that since, of course, and some adjustments to the plan. This well-established group was retained when the previous development proceeded, and their removal lacks justification. However, I would prefer the suggestion made by Councillor Bradnam that, taking a long-term view, the developers might choose to establish another site. As to the impact of the development on the neighbouring villages and the viewpoints, I wasn't convinced from my visit that that was, given the very significant distances, that was going to have a significant level of harm, certainly not such as would offset the economic benefit through the enhancement of employment floor space at Grant Park. And as we know, this is a factor which is, I mean, obviously it is set out in the local plan in NPPF, but it's of particular local concern, the need for further space, not in this case for labs. So while I may be disappointed that it wasn't possible to accommodate the suggestions of the design panel when looking at the four-storey version of B4, I think we have to accept that there is a need for additional space and that the impact of that on the surrounding area will not sufficient as to justify a refusal. We clearly have to consider the application before us, not any other application that might have been put forward. And although this is outlined, this is, I think, part of the parameter plans. So I think, Chair, that I was the last one wanting to speak here. I would be proposing that we move to a vote, and I would intend to vote.
Councillor Bradnam.
Can I just finish what I'm saying, Chair? I would propose that we move... No, I'll finish what I'm saying. I would propose that we move to a vote, and my intention would be to vote in favour. Thank you, Chairman. I've now finished what I wanted to say.
Before we go to a vote, Chair, could I request that we ask for an additional condition? Condition 4 refers to the arboricultural method statement, but I would like to suggest that we add a condition requiring planting of the trees as I described. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what I would like.
Can we ask advice of the officers?
Through you, Chair. Our response would be is that landscaping is a reserved matter to be dealt with at a later stage. If it helps, I mean, the applicants here in the room anyway, so we'll have heard the discussions, but we could add an informative on potentially to suggest that we couldn't add a condition, I don't think, to this.
Would that be acceptable?
I would like the informative to be quite specific. So I would like it to refer to a minimum of 8 oaks and 2 maples in a location that will not jeopardise future development of the site. In other words, that it would be planned as part of the ongoing development of the site, such that it won't be in the way of new development and get it booted out. You know, I'd like to see these grow to 40 years, 50 years. Can we frame some words around that?
Apparently it's possible, so we take that. We get the vote, and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. On the subject of trees, can we also make sure that those trees are properly maintained? Yes. Because after what we've seen happening along the A14, that there is an ongoing requirement for those trees to be properly maintained or replaced if they die.
Thank you. I'm just briefly going to comment because before we go to the vote, and I've had a request to go to the vote, so following that I will go to the vote. I was going to comment that I would concur with Councillor Fain's view that the distance that you have, the impact is not really significant. It's already, you can see some buildings, the effect of the additional buildings, even with the site higher, at that distance really is only a minor feature in the landscape and not, I don't feel personally that's a particularly significant issue. The impact on Abington Hall, however, of the extension of B3 is quite significant. I think the pressure of the employment argument is strong, it's close, but the landscaping, I would concur, will be a very important element in the, this is an outline application. The landscaping will be very important on that, and that's something we all need to take concern. The other issue raised by the Parish Council of noise is, I'm sure, significant if it's been problems over a number of years, but building new development to a higher standard of insulation may actually improve the noise, but it's a factor that we should be taking into account in the detail, really taking account at the later stage in the reserved matters. But that will be an issue that I think we ought to make particular attention to and make sure that the situation is improved rather than getting worse. Just because it's larger, it's really a matter of the insulation issues. Those are the issues that I think, but overall, my tendency is to think that the advantages in terms of local employment outweigh the undoubted impact. And I shall be supporting this application. Can we now go to a vote, please? Councillor, yeah, I'm second.
Well, I was just about to do that to support Councillor Fain, but I was just going to say, if we could just have it noted about when I said on my questions about CSET, about the funding to, and have the words for alternative as well, which I'm sure should not be controversial in the room. And then I was going to second Councillor Fain's recommendation to go to a vote.
Second for...
yes,
Chair
second.
Second, yeah.
We had a second as well.
I think that's everybody, Chair. Let me just double check. Yeah, that should be everybody, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, the application is approved. Thank you very much indeed. Now we move to application, get the number right here, 23/00329, also at TBWI, and it's a listed building application for creation of a 4-metre wide opening in the curtilage to listed wall to enable the creation of an east-west shared access, which forms part of the outline application 22/05549 together with the general repair of copings and masonry to the wall. And the key issue is it's a heritage asset. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Michael Hammond, could you please introduce?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, as mentioned, this is the list of building consent that accompanied the outline application. It's for the creation of a 4-metre opening to the curtilage listed wall related to Abington Hall. To allow for the access through. I'll quickly run you through some plans. So obviously you saw the wider site location in the previous item, so just to focus on what this relates to, you have the cottage in here, and then there's this wall which has an existing opening here, and the proposal would be to insert a further opening further to the south. So the new opening would have a maximum width of 4 metres, and this is to allow a vehicle to be able to go through and either access the disabled parking spaces or for drop-off of people. There are some technical details about how the piers would look. Just for reference to show its previous relationship with Abington Hall prior to the park. Sorry, I think it is tucked away. I think it might be this little bit in, it's related to here, I believe. I think the next slide, I think, shows it more clearly. It's, this is probably easier. It's this in here. So in relation to Abington Hall, down here. This is a view of the cottage, and then the wall runs to the south down here, so here's the existing opening. And just another view of the wall in question. And then how it fits in with the wider master plan of the outline permission. Again, it's this opening in here. So approval is recommended. The conservation team are supportive of this listed building consent application. No harm has been identified to heritage assets, including the listed building itself. And so approval is recommended subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can I have the speaker, the applicant, please? Mr. Justin Bainton.
I'm happy for the debate to continue. Thank you, Chair. Got nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. The Parish Council, Mr. Orgy, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, yes. The Parish Council's views are set out in full in paragraph 6.2 of this particular agenda item. Parish Council noted that a considerable part of this listed wall had been knocked down during the construction of the Robert Jenkins building, and the Council felt that no further changes should be made to the listed wall apart from repair and maintenance. In the Parish Council's view, the applicant should find an alternative access without interfering with the wall. This was one of the issues that came up very strongly at the 30th of January 2023 public meeting held in the Abington Institute, and there was widespread opposition from those attending to this particular action. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Have we any questions for Mr. Orgy? Councillor Brad.
Thank you. Mr. Orgy, could you just remind us when the wall was originally built and whether it is contemporaneous with the cottage?
I'm not too sure of the details, but I understand it's part of the walled garden of Abington Hall, and I presume it was built in the late 18th, early 19th century.
I may come
But
back.
that's a personal view. I might be incorrect. I can't guarantee that that's absolutely correct.
I think it is shown on the 1885 plan, the wall at least. Anyway, okay, thank you. Right.
Yeah, I believe the hall itself had some major building work in about 1820.
Have we any further questions?
I see no others.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Orgy. Mrs. Ashridge, so Mrs. Ashridge from Little Abington Parish Council, do you wish to speak?
No, Little Abington have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Well, we now move to the debate. That's Councillor Brandon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, actually, with the officer first, before, On 7.1, the second bullet on page 167 refers to the fact that the section that's being proposed to be removed is a corner section, which would have provided bracing for, it would have been like, it would have provided bracing for the remaining section. And I just wonder whether in the provision of piers to make the opening, whether there is an intention to provide some buttressing to support, because now you're going to end up with some sections of wall that basically look like this. With, at one place there's a pier, and then there's another gap. So this is going to be vulnerable. It would be vulnerable because it hasn't got this. So is there some plan to provide some buttressing in the provision of piers?
I think that's a question for the officers.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen again because I think the plans show it better than I could describe. So at the bottom here is the section. So it would be filled in here with potential for, yeah, so I think it appears to be, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the pier there, yeah. I mean, the detail would come through in the conservation officer's condition as well. I think it's condition number 4, I believe.
Thanks. Can you just tell me, on the section, the lower section of this diagram, I can't read, and don't worry, don't enlarge it, but maybe you can tell me.
Yep.
There's some writing over the left section of the wall, and then there's some writing pointing to a vertical element. Is that referring to some kind, over to the right a bit? Yep, above there's some wording that refers to that vertical element.
Yeah, it says existing masonry piers at regular centres.
Okay. So it's relying on that pier to keep it up. Okay.
To follow on from that, I just was asking whether the conservation officer had any views upon the existing aperture and whether that should be closed, rebuilt using materials from the stuff that would be taken away if it was removed, or whether there was any comment on that at all.
No, I think, through Chair, it would also link back to the previous outline application. Part of the landscaping strategy you will have seen the illustrative master plan. Actually, I think there's a copy of that in my slides. Let me share that. Because it did form part of that arrangement as well. So I don't think we'd want to necessarily lose that. Let's probably do it. Bear with me. So you can see that existing opening is still to be utilised. Admittedly, this is an illustrative plan, but as part of the wider landscaping and connecting in with this courtyard area, I think we'd quite like to probably see that retained from an urban design and landscaping perspective. I think that would be our view on that. Thank you.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, if I'd wandered onto Granta Park without the advantage of the papers in front of me, I'd have never known this was a heritage asset. It's surrounded by industrial commercial buildings. Part of it's overgrown with vegetation. I think on the scale of important heritage assets, it rates fairly low. I would have no objections to part of the wall being taken away, provided, as previously discussed, the applicant ensures there's no health and safety issues with the remaining wall and it's all secure. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to focus in on page 167, 8.2, which refers to the MPPF, and it says any harm to or loss of the significance of a heritage asset should require clear and convincing justification. It might not be the prettiest wall, it might not be in the best state of repair, but it is, you know, I feel very strongly that we do need listed buildings and listed items, walls, houses, churches, whatever they be. They're listed for a reason, and they will have a story behind them, and they are protected for a reason. And I feel very strongly about that. Now, there are times when it's needed, and, you know, I think many of us sat on the application for the site in Sawston, didn't we? And we actually gave permission for it to be knocked down. It was not a nice day. But here, I think there are alternatives. I don't think it's completely necessary to do what they're doing in this proposal. And so I don't see a clear, convincing justification. I think if we don't fight to keep what we've got and what is listed, then what's the point of having the protections in the first place? So it might not be the prettiest wall, but I'd like to see it stay.
Okay, Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I take account of what Councillor Williams said. However, I think on this sort of an issue, we do have to accept the advice of our conservation officers. Paragraph 8.8, it is considered that the physical removal of part of the wall would only result in a very low amount of less than substantial harm to the designated heritage asset, i.e. the wall. And I certainly wouldn't have the confidence to say that it's not necessary. I think it is reasonable to assume that in designing this scheme, it was felt that it was necessary and that we're not in a position to contradict that. So with that in mind, I would suggest that since everyone has had a contribution who wanted it in the debate, I would propose that we now move to a vote.
Councillor Bradley.
Could we perhaps consider the point that was made earlier on, that whether any of the materials from the piece of the wall that's being taken away could be used in the construction of the piers? However, I appreciate the piers are going to be there for a structural purpose, and it may be better to use modern materials in order to support the new entrance. But I just wondered whether that might, you know, could they be used elsewhere on the site? Could they be retrieved?
Can I ask the officer, is it possible to have condition that the material be retained and reused? Because they are old hand-made bricks, they are quite distinctive bricks that we use.
Short answer is yes, Chair. Condition number 4 would seek to do that. So condition 4 is the reuse of materials. So it's definitely part of our intention, and the conservation team recommended that condition.
So do you want to take Councillor Griffith or second my motion?
It's fine.
Motion
Condition
now that
4
we go to
covers
the
it.
vote. Please, thank you very much. Can we go to the vote? Can we have electronic vote, please?
Sorry, have you got a seconder for that?
The Chair has just effectively.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the first part of what you said. Sorry.
We're voting to agree to the recommendation to approve the listed building application, listed building consent. Thank you. I thought I'd done. Who's it? Oh, it's not working. Oh, maybe. Okay. No, that's fine now. I thought I...
So that's fine.
So the application is approved. We now move on to the compliance report. Is Mr. Braybrook here, please?
Good afternoon, Chair. Obviously, hopefully everyone's seen the compliance report. I do have some additional bits to bring to the committee's attention.
Sorry,
It's
Chair,
just sort of.
Is it possible to see the officer? It's a bit strange having a voice coming from... yes, but it wasn't coming up here yet. Okay.
Can everyone see me?
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, so there's a couple of bits that I wanted to bring to the committee's attention that aren't in the report, just because of timings of submitting the report and things that have gone on. I just wanted to let the committee know that the online compliance reporting continues to be well used and is now the dominant way that compliance matters are raised with the council. And because of that, we're now sort of pushing to ensure and send a message that all new breaches are reported via the online system. So if I could just kind of remind committee members that when things are brought to your attention, if we could use the online reporting, and I'll come on to why in a second, that would be really good. We are sending messages to customers to say that, you know, to use the online reporting. The reasons behind this are that we've made recent changes to setting up of compliance cases. Compliance cases are now set up by the technical support team who do the validations for the planning applications. This is ensuring that new reports are dealt with in a timely manner, that acknowledgements are sent out as well, which is an issue that's been raised by committee members. It also ensures that when we get urgent complaints, those urgent complaints are dealt with quickly and we get out on site in a more timely manner. We recently discussed at one committee about people who wish to remain anonymous, and in that committee we discussed people who want to be anonymous to contact their parish council or their elected members. Wording for this has been agreed for website changes, which is something we discussed, and we'll be looking to point people towards how to contact their parish council or their elected member. We do have a significant increase in reports being made to the council for compliance matters. The online reporting obviously is having a positive effect in terms of people being able to contact us and feel confident in contacting us. There is obviously a high level of workload with officers at the moment, but we are looking to change our working patterns to ensure that we keep on top of the new workload that's coming in. So that's my update. In addition to the report that was submitted.
Have we questions? Councillor Williams.
Am I safe to talk? Thank you for the update and thank you for the changes, because I know I raised that as I was sort of seeing increased traffic for myself, because let's say the unfortunate nature of compliance is sometimes we're dealing with sort of neighbours and what have you, and things can escalate quite quickly. With the new report, and I understand the reasons, you know, why you've changed the report. The only thing that I'd say I can't glean from it in the way I used to be able to is obviously when we had cases on there, we'd be able to give a reflection of time and whether certain cases were on there for a series of time. So I'm just wondering, while we have the comparatives, which is very useful, what we can't see is are these refreshed applications or are they sort of historical, troublesome sort of sites or applications? So I'm wondering if we could have some sort of breakdown of how many cases have we got sort of that were entered in the last 6 months, 12 months and beyond, just so we can see whether what we're seeing is fresh applications or still the same ones. We used to be able to see that, particularly in relation to one site, not mentioning which one that was.
I will go back on that and see how we can produce reports that would do that, and then to obviously attach that to the compliance report for committee, and hopefully we can sort that out. I'll give you an update on that at the next committee in November if that report hasn't already been generated and that information is not on the report. I'll give you an update as to where we are with that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make a general question. There's been a lot of discussion recently about the need to improve the operation of the planning system. Have you any particular recommendations in terms of what you would make your life easier in terms of the enforcement system, so that we can take these into account? In any comment we may.
That's quite a question. Would it be possible for me to have a think about that and come back to you at the next committee, Chair?
I think it would be
Or is it-
interesting to find out, because this seems to be an issue recently.
I'll make a note of that and I'll come back to you at the next committee on that as well, if that's okay.
Councillor Braddon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. I wanted to ask two things. One is about on your Appendix 4, if we're including that. So this is appeals awaiting a decision. It's the very first one on page 177, land to the north of the old coal yard, Chesterton Fen. There's an appeal against the enforcement notice, and I just wanted to know, do we have any idea of when this might be, when we might get a decision? And I have a second question, but I'll wait.
So there are a number of enforcement appeals that have been going on for some considerable time. The planning inspectorate is quite delayed in enforcement appeals. They are experiencing delays due to staffing, experienced staff for enforcement appeals. Certainly for the appeal you've spoken about, having relevant staff with experience is a difficulty. At this moment in time, I'm not sure about the figures for this month. Last month, I think the median waiting time for a written reps appeal was around 56 weeks and about 86 weeks for hearings and inquiries. These numbers are slightly skewed because enforcement appeals are figures are put together with appeals on lawful development certificates, and they generally are easier for the planning inspectorate to deal with rather than enforcement. And I suggest that enforcement cases are probably taking longer above the medians. The inspectorate won't give us any updates on when we ask about appeals and when we're likely to receive decisions. They just say that they're in the in progress, and we'll get updates as and when they can give updates. It is unfortunate, but there is a large backlog with enforcement appeals.
Thank you very much. And if I may come back through you, Chair, with my second question. There is an application that's not on these papers, but was in fact refused in a similar location to the previous one I've mentioned. I just wondered whether enforcement action will be taken to remove the development at that site. I can describe that to you, Chris. I'm sure you know the one I mean, but I can give you the details of it. It was refused recently, 16th of August, sorry, the 20th of April 2023, it was refused.
Okay.
I can give you the reference, 22/03715/full, and it was refused 20th of April, but I wondered if there's any action going to be taken about removing what's there.
I'm not sure I am aware of the site we're talking about, but I can come back to you shortly with this later today, tomorrow, and just let you know what's happening with that outside of this meeting, if that's all right.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
We'll contact you separately.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you very much. Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two comments, if I may. This system of reporting, I noticed that, for instance, there's no reference to one case in my ward where I've just this morning counted the emails. I think it's 32 emails, about half of which are responses from the compliance team. Not mentioned here. I won't mention it by name because I suspect Christopher knows which one I'm referring to. There is listed here under Appendix 2, and forgive me if that's not clear, I'm sure Chris will tell me and I'll elaborate as necessary. At Appendix 2, the top one for July 2023 relates to, I take this as an example, the navigator. Now, I believe there has been an appeal against enforcement submitted, so there's a further stage here.
There has, yes.
Thank you. I mention this because in that case, and I think there may be other cases, in order to comply with environmental health requirements, the ventilation is necessary for the kitchen. Without the ventilation, the Thai restaurant, I don't know whether that requires particularly high level of ventilation, I'm not sure, would cease to operate. Without the Thai restaurant, I am persuaded that the pub, which has recently become an asset of community value, would cease to be viable and would have to close quite quickly. So it just illustrates why it's important to us to keep an eye on the various stages of these compliance issues.
I think I would comment that it's clearly that enforcement, the delays in the enforcement and the process of enforcement is extremely slow, and we have lots of problems with it. So that's why I was asking for comments upon on possible the ways that you might consider dealing with that without any political application, just practical comments on that might help us. Well, thank you very much indeed. Now we move to appeals. Could Rebecca, would you please comment on?
Oh, now I'm squeaking. Item 9, there's a list of the current appeals that we have recently received decisions on, as well as those that have been received. And again, in the Appendix 4, there's quite a list where we're waiting on decisions still from PINS. We're experiencing the same delays that Chris has talked about as well. And just by way of an update, the Alstone Croft inquiry, I know everybody would be interested, even though it's in the city, that finished last week. So hopefully we won't have to wait too long to get the appeal decision from the inspector.
I note that this month all the appeals that have been raised have agreed with us, so that's a pleasant result. Have we any other further questions? Thank you very much. Okay. Now the date of the next meeting, I've been given the wrong date here because on my briefing notes, I think it must be the 8th of November. We'd like to confirm that. Okay, the next meeting is the 8th of November, and I hope to see you all there. And thank you. With that, I close the meeting.